For people of a certain generation, this morning's news brought a tug of nostalgia. Pete Seeger, the gifted songwriter and quintessential folk singer, died late yesterday at the age of 94. His music set the tone for political movements of the 50s and 60s and inspired future generations of musicians.
If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning.
If you didn't know his name, you certainly knew his music. Pete Seeger was an advocate for social and equal rights, which is why his music endured and why so many artists borrowed his tunes.
To everything turn.
Pete Seeger credited blues and folk musician Leadbelly, who wrote of gospel, blues, women in prison, with his inspiration and love of folk music. A 1964 WGBH documentary, Two Lines of a Chain, includes some of the only footage ever recorded of Leadbelly.
Take this hammer.
After he died, some of those songs became famous around the world. Good Night, Irene, Midnight Special, Old Cotton Fields at Home.
A one-time self-proclaimed communist, Seeger wrote to President Kennedy in 1961 seeking help in keeping him out of jail. He wrote, "Do I, or does any citizen, have the right to hold unorthodox views, whether they be purely right or horribly wrong?" Meanwhile, Seeger implored everyone to play Leadbelly songs and said, "Make it your own. It's the folk process."
Before we go, let's sing one chorus, maybe, of Leadbelly's favorite song. It was his theme song. Irene, good night. Irene, good night. You hum along with me. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dream.
It's hard to measure an artist's influence, but there's no denying that Pete Seeger left a significant mark on the American music scene. I'm joined now by Brad Paul, the president of Brad Paul Media and former host of a folk music radio show here at WGBH. Welcome to Greater Boston.
Thank you, Emily. Pleased to be here.
Pete Seeger had local ties and local connections to Boston and Cambridge as well.
Yeah, in the greater Northeast as well. He was one of the founding members of the Newport Folk Festival, which of course had a big impact on the folk music scene here. But Club Passim, Club 47, was a direct outcome of Pete's presence out there, getting people to listen to traditional folk music, learning how to, pick up a banjo and play or guitar, and just his whole ethos about participation. I think his legacy, what we remember about Pete, was that music wasn't necessarily supposed to be a business. It was supposed to be about the sharing of music and the sharing of ideas and bringing people together.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because when I was watching the documentary, it struck me about how many people have done Where Have All the Flowers Gone or Turn, Turn, Turn. And he said, oh, no, just take the music and make it your own. I mean, I'm not sure that that would fly in this day and age, that one person writes the song and everybody else records it and gets the credit for it.
Well, as long as somebody gets a royalty check somewhere in that chain, right? But I think in some ways the Internet has democratized music to a certain degree. And I don't know this for a fact, but I would think Pete probably felt that that was a good, positive step. But he was not into the idea of the commercialization of music or the idea of, performing music for a monetary gain. For him, it was always about moving social justice forward, bringing people together. He grew up. His father was an ethnomusicologist, Charles Seeger, and so he was out there in the field at a time when he saw people making music as, a pastime, something you did on the back porch with friends and family, not as chasing the gold brass ring.
Well, how did he connect with Leadbelly? How did that happen? I mean, he just thought Leadbelly was, the king of all folk and blues, that he said there will never be anyone like him.
That was the association that he had with Alan and John Lomax, who were ethnomusicologists who had discovered Leadbelly and introduced Pete to him.
And there were others. I mean, I mentioned Peter, Paul and Mary and Judy Collins. Bob Dylan was greatly influenced by Pete Seeger as well.
Absolutely. You know, they had a great relationship. There's that famous story that supposedly when Dylan showed up at the Newport Folk Festival with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band and Went Electric, that Pete was trying to cut through the power cord with an axe. People who were there, including the festival producer George Wein, said, no, it didn't really happen, although apparently there was an axe next to the stage, but it had been used the set before by the prison singers that they had brought in to perform.
I can't think of too many people who had Pete Seeger's endurance, too, because, I mean, he was singing until fairly recently.
Well, he recorded and released his last album in 2009. Pete Seeger at 89. You know, it's remarkable. You think about it, over 7 decades. And the thing I think about Pete is, I was thinking about it today. He's 10 years older than my father, but I never thought of him as my parents' generation. I always thought of him as being relevant, and I always wanted to know what he was thinking, what he was up to doing.
Funny, because he's 2 years, exactly the same age as my father would have been, and I always thought of him as a lot younger. So.
Yeah, see, there you go.
Brad, Paul, thanks so much.